that's the letters. If you like those better than the numbers, most people don't even think about letters anymore, but it makes it easy. I figured Greg and Carol spent all that money to get 220 WSTU. You got to kind of go with it. So anyway, that is the number in the studio. If you want to call us or if you've got a question, my name is Mark Breckbill. I'm a CPA and a licensed community association manager, and have been practicing in this area for 20, 25 years or so, primarily dealing with condos and HOAs. Also participate and sit on the CPA, the Florida CPA's CIRA committee, which is a committee that handles common interest realty associations, condos, HOAs, that kind of thing, and helps determine some of the tax and accounting issues for associations in the state of Florida. And so I've been on that committee for, I think, 10 or 12 or 15 years, something like that. And it's interesting because we get a lot of feedback, but hopefully we can give you some feedback. The person that most of you call for is our attorney that's been doing this forever and ever, Peter Mullengarden. Peter has been working with us for 16 or 17 years on the show since the beginning. He's been part of the show and been an integral part of the show because he's the one that you guys call for all of those legal questions, which I know are confusing. So anyway, he's here ready to answer calls. A couple of things that we'll mention to you is, first of all, we do give you the best answer we can, but we don't have your documents. So if you've got something you're going to go to court on, or you need to take legal action or whatever, you should really sit down with somebody like Peter and have him go over your documents and then give you some advice, because it could change his answer. For that reason, for the fact that we don't have your documents, we don't. We encourage you to, call, and we're going to give you an answer that's as close as we possibly can based on your understanding of your documents and those kind of things. But we may also talk a little broader about your problem and your question, because some others out there may have a similar question or similar problem. So we'll try to handle theirs as well, and you'll be the person that asks the question. So that's a good thing. We like those brave souls who call in and ask the question so that the others don't have to. So that's nice. And so we're here for those and do the best we can. But as I say, you should really contact Peter or somebody like Peter if you've got a answer you need a hard and fast answer. Otherwise, when you call in, all we need is a name. We don't even need your name, and we don't need the association, because, as I said, that might discourage some others from not listening because they may think it doesn't apply to them, and we may talk about their problem while we're talking about your problem. So that's the bottom line, and that's how we always open the show, kind of the only caveats we have. But otherwise, we're here to answer your questions and give you information, so take advantage of it, and please give us a call. Good morning, Peter. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm well. How are you?
Yeah. You're. I'm sure you're pretty excited about the weekend and the FSU Miami game. That was you can go back to being a Miami fan again. That's good. For a while,
still a Miami fan.
For a while there, you were stuck being just Virginia. And
no, I still have my season tickets to the Canes. But when they play Virginia, it is a I do have to switch over to Virginia.
Well, I noticed the season tickets. Did you pay for one of those cutouts out there that they put in the stands that you can so it looks like you're there? I think that
I have you instead of me. Wearing a Canes hat. Okay?
Wearing a Canes hat. That'd be good. Be better than an FSU hat.
FSU has some issues right now.
Yeah, they do. This is going to be a bad year for them. I think we all went through this at some point in time. The question is whether you ever come out of it. FSU's been going through it for a while here, so it's hard when you
they will
when you can't you can't come out of it. But the one of the things I was going to I think that the college football makes a mistake, especially like Florida and Miami, and what they should do is like in your case, for example, you get season tickets, and then you should pay like an extra $500 and you can get a cutout, maybe even 200. You get a cutout of yourself, and they can put them in the stands. When you can't go to the games, you could be there and be socially distancing. That would be pretty cool. And all your
I
family
don't
members.
like myself that much.
But it would make it look like you were part of the action. I think that would be a way to go. Everybody that has season tickets should get an automatic cutout in case they don't show up, so you can use their spot. But anyway,
Well,
so yeah, it's gonna be an interesting time. I didn't catch the Gator game until it was over, and I saw it on a replay, just part of it. And I'll be darned, the replay it was on ESPN, but it was there was no booth audio. So when they would cut to the booth to talk about replays, you didn't get to see the replay. You didn't get to hear what they were saying. And so that's, I didn't realize how much of a crutch that is to watching the game. Like the first play in the Gator game, the guy got ejected for targeting. The Gators safety got ejected for targeting, and that was a problem for them because they were thin at they have a strong defensive backfield, but they were thin at that particular position because the guy backing him up was out as well, and so they were down to a true freshman. And but it was kind of interesting because they go to that kind of a situation with that, and you want to go see the hit to see if it was really targeting, and unfortunately, you couldn't. I couldn't see it. So my son saw the game. He said it was targeting. The kid lowered his head and should have been sitting down for the rest of the game.
well,
But anyway, so
okay.
but otherwise, did you have a good weekend?
Yeah, it was nice actually.
Yeah.
Went to the beach a couple times.
So now we have our first caller here, and looks to me with my glasses off like that's Charlie. So Charlie, go ahead.
Why I wanted to call years ago when I lived up in Connecticut. I grew up in New York, Long Island.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, we would put on I think it was DRC, and Joe D would do the announcing of the UConn basketball game, and we would mute the sound on the television, and it was synchronized. It was beautiful, fantastic. And then eventually they figured it out, and they did a delay, which kind of upset all the UConn fans.
That's when Howard Cosell was in the booth on Monday Night Football. The same thing. They used to do the same thing. People would across the board would turn off the sound so that you couldn't hear Howard, and then they would listen to the radio play-by-play.
Yeah, Howard Cosell was a piece of work. That's for sure.
He was.
He and Muhammad Ali. Cassius Clay had quite a relationship.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. They did. That was pretty interesting.
I remember going to a drive-in theater and watching Sonny Liston and Cassius Clay in their fight, and that was unbelievable.
Yeah, that was pretty cool in the day. I remember seeing all that was pretty neat. I think that's pretty cool, and I'll cut you some slack for being a Connecticut basketball fan, but I mean, in the day they did have a team.
That's where men are men and women are champions.
Yeah, that's true.
But now that Sue Bird is involved with that soccer player, I kind of lost my taste for her.
Oh,
but in any case, that's a whole nother story.
Well,
all right, buddies. And
thanks.
I do like your show, and I also like the 1590. Your sister channel.
Oh, we appreciate it. Well, thanks very much for calling.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
You too. See ya. Bye. Yeah, that's kind of cool. I like get a little call there on, get a little basketball going, a little sports going on Monday morning. Speaking of that, I'll kind of try to segue back into Cirrus. But speaking of that, it has gotten in a lot of associations, the common room. When we've got like particularly the high rises things. They've got lobbies and then they got they've got their own meeting room or common room. And, a lot of these places were built years and years ago, and the amenities that were put in there were were appropriate for that point in time, but not necessarily for today. For example, we're talking basketball there, and now everybody's got big screen TVs and everything's internet TV. And so high-speed internet is a big deal. Having the building wired for high-speed internet is a big deal. And having it available in the common areas that you can log on and all of that. And yet, 40 years ago when these buildings were built, or 35 years ago when they were built, nobody was really considering those things. Peter, what do you think in terms of your situation, in terms of going forward? What's your opinion about how much of that an association can do without, some really large majority of the members approving? How much? How many of these changes can you make?
Well, that's a good question, which comes up constantly in terms of material alterations. You can also throw in additions to the common elements or to the association property, and what can you do and what can you not do. And for condominiums, we'll just go to the law first, and then we'll try to analyze applying the law to the facts. Under 718.113, subsection 113, it provides that material alterations or substantial additions to the common elements or to association property. Now, association property is property that a condominium association owns or leases. So, for example, rec lease property, if you have an old rec lease, or if you actually own property, which is pretty unusual for an association to actually own property, but sometimes they lease it. So anyway, so under the statute, to make a material alteration or substantial addition, you need the approval of that's set forth in the declaration of condominium. And if the declaration of condominium is silent as to the approval, you then need the approval of 75% of the voting interests of the members of the association. You have to get that approval before you make the alteration. They clarified that 2 years ago.
Okay.
And cases have pretty much upheld that you can't go in after the fact to get the approval. You have to get the approval beforehand. So that begs the question then, right? What is a material alteration?
Right.
Or substantial addition? And pretty much the courts have followed a case that was decided back in the 70s. It's called Sterling Village versus Breitenbach, or Sterling Village Association versus Breitenbach. And I'll paraphrase it for you and for the audience. But basically what that means is if you change the form, shape, elements, or specifications of the property in a manner that you palpably or appreciably affect the use, function, or appearance, you've now made a material alteration. Now, they've applied that, and that's a paraphrase, but they've applied that to all sorts of situations, and it's pretty strictly applied. For example, there's many cases where any change of color, okay, when you're changing, this is outside or inside. If you're going to change the exterior color of the buildings, if you're even going to change the trim color, that's a material alteration. There's cases dealing with interiors where if you change the color of the hallways when you're painting, that's a material alteration. In my opinion, if you change the color of your carpeting, that's a material alteration. Now, you can't match it exactly, and there's all sorts of shades of gray, not to use a pun. Okay.
Right.
But getting to your situation or your question, when you change the use, okay, of a portion of the common elements, there's some cases where they changed. I think they changed a conference room or a board room into an office, or they made some other change of a use of a room from one use to another use. That change of use is deemed to be a material alteration. And the division applies pretty strict standards to this, and so do the courts. The exceptions, there's a line of cases where the exceptions are if you make an alteration, which is necessary though for the maintenance, repair, or protection of the property, even though it's an alteration, we'll deem that to be within the maintenance function. And the two most, I guess, well-known cases, they both deal with condominiums that were on the ocean, on the beach, and they had erosion problems. One put up or extended their seawall. The other put out a rock jetty, rock revetment, both alterations. In each case, the court held, though, that fit within the board's maintenance responsibility because they were trying to protect the property from the erosion when they created the, extension of the seawall or they built the rock jetty. So even though these were clearly material alterations because there were things that weren't there before, they weren't done just for aesthetics. They were done to protect the property. Now that's been taken to other contexts as well, with respect to maintenance and repair versus alteration. So you really have to analyze the situation. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Are you changing use, function, or appearance in a palpable or appreciable manner? And then and if so, look for your documents. What approval do you need? Every now and then you'll see a declaration that allows the board to do it. In fact, I just sent an email over this weekend from one of my associations where their board has the authority to make or approve material alterations. That's the exception, though. Typically, the declaration of condominium will require owner approval of some percentage to approve a material alteration or a substantial addition to the common elements.
I'm kind of surprised, Peter, that that the courts haven't at least wrapped in some language relative to the permanency of the alteration. Like I've said before, to me, I think it's ludicrous that painting is considered a material alteration when it can be fixed or changed almost instantaneously. I mean, even the cost of it is not an overwhelming cost when you consider it over. The worst case scenarios, you might get stuck with it for 7 years or 6 years or something like that. And whereas if you put in a rock jetty or you completely change, you take some room that the association owned and you lease it or sell it out or do something different with it. I can understand that. That's kind of a permanent change, But
that makes. I think that you make a good point. I think sometimes the facts of these cases influence the judge. Okay, the case that really started that was a case from many years ago, the painting case, where there was a condominium, and when it was built, it had like a pastel exterior color scheme, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very tropical, very Florida, pastel looking, right?
Right.
So these people bought in, and then the association painted all the buildings like shades of brown and beige. and they got kind of upset because, I guess you were expecting this Florida tropical paradise and they ended up with a brown and beige, not so paradise. And in that case, even the judge said it was a structural change, which was really, somewhat surprising because, typically think of paint as
right.
structural. But so that kind of started off. And so in that case, when it was held that, changing the paint color was a material structural alteration, ever since that case, the division has been very, very consistent in changing color is a material alteration. Again, all of these situations, you do have to look to the cases and how if they interpreted, whether it's through the division or through the appellate courts, because there's a myriad, obviously, of different fact patterns, right? And it's difficult even for me, and not even for me, like I'm so smart, but it's difficult sometimes. I shouldn't say my worst nightmare, because that's not true. It's an overstatement. But one of the more difficult situations, and I think that I've probably mentioned this on the air before, is when associations, clients, they start doing redecorating projects, or they're doing remodeling, because oftentimes that's a mixture of alterations and maintenance. Because they're replacing old worn out carpet, right? So if it's old and worn out, you shouldn't have to have old, that's maintenance and repair. But what do you replace it with? When you're replacing the furniture or the wall coverings, and you want to, you don't want the place to look like 1978 anymore. And for those of us who lived in 1978, maybe that's a good thing. Right?
That's right.
But then you're in this kind of in this box, where you want to, obviously update the property, improve it, make it look nice. and yet we also have this alteration issue. So it's like a mixture of maintenance, repair, and the material alteration. So the analysis of those projects sometimes can become difficult. But like I said, there was a case that I'm aware of out of the division where there was a chair railing or a wainscoting that was going down the hallways, and it was getting old and rotten. It was wood, and the walls, I think, were a beige color and whatever. And they took down the wainscoting, the chair rail, and they didn't replace it. And they painted the place from, I guess it was beige to like a salmon color. I might get the facts if it's wrong. But in that case, both of those things were held to be material alterations because now the hallways looked, quite frankly, very different, because there was no more chair rail. But they thought the chair rail, it was old and rotten, and they didn't want to replace it. So again, you have to look at these facts, and then try to figure out. Now, if in doubt, and I'm always of this opinion, especially when they change the law now that you can't really approve the alterations after the fact. If in doubt, get the vote or approval under your documents, because you really create a can of worms if you go out and spend, a lot of money on doing your project, and it turns out that you've created a material alteration without getting the approval of the owners, and now the way the statutes read, you might not be able to get the vote of the owners afterwards. So what do? Go back to the way it was. It's created this, this issue, a dilemma. So again, any associations that's considering a project which includes, something that would be regarded as a material or maybe regarded as a material alteration, talk to your attorney. I know I shouldn't be shilling for the lawyers, right? But talk to your attorney, get an opinion. Now, if there's a maintenance function, for example, there's some other cases out of division where an association is allowed to take advantage of new technologies, new materials, better materials that weren't available when the condominium was constructed. And again, these things may last a lot longer, cheaper to maintain. And there's some cases that say that even though they might look somewhat different, that you can take advantage of those new technologies, those new materials, as far as their maintenance and their durability factor, and therefore they're not material alterations, or may not be considered material alterations because you're not doing it again just to change the appearance, just to change the look for aesthetic purposes, but for the for the fact that that they will last longer, they will be cheaper to maintain, they will save the association money. One of those examples is like LED lighting. Some people hate it, like it, whatever, but those light fixtures, will now last whatever X amount of years, right, without having to be changed out. Therefore, saving the association in terms of energy costs and the replacement costs of those light bulb or light fixtures. So that's one example. Other examples are where maybe the association, there's a certain area that was poorly designed. Like, for example, you might have near where the pool is, the entry to the building might be a marble or some other floor that's very slippery when it's wet, yet it always gets wet because people are coming in and out from the pool, and that was just a bad design because that area is now slippery, dangerous. So maybe you replace that flooring with something a little different that is, not so slick, not so slippery. Yet you're not doing it just because you want to change the appearance, but you want to make the area safer, because right now it's not safe because of the way it was designed originally. So again, there are factors to look at, and I know I'm kind of droning on here, but this is something that comes up, and it's a good question. It comes up all the time.
Yeah, and I know, it's like I had an association in southern Martin County that it was a wood buildings, and they were constantly dealing with termites and wood rot, and at the time the buildings were built, there really wasn't any hardy plank, and it wasn't so I know that was a situation where you look at that, and I think that the ability to they were having hundreds of thousands of dollars in repairs a year, because they never knew for sure. Every time they went to work on it, they never knew for sure whether it was going to be a $2,000 job or a $20,000 job. And so it was. So there's things like that where there's been some significant changes. Now I think that this just my suggestion, but since we're under emergency powers right now, I think now's a great time to change anything you want, because I have heard, for example, that the coronavirus does not adapt well to pastel blue. So if you want to paint your building pastel blue, and it's been brown for a few years, and you're since the beginning, and you're thinking, I can't do that because it's going to be a material alteration, we have emergency powers. It's an emergency now because of the coronavirus to paint that blue. Do you agree with me, Peter? Is that a good?
Yeah, I think they should put you on the coronavirus task force.
I think so.
Yeah, you can take
get some
Fauci's
things
place.
done. I could get some things done. I'm pretty sure I could.
But I heard it was pastel yellow, so I guess I heard from a different source.
Well, they changed it. First it was pastel blue, and then it was pastel yellow. Now they've come back to pastel blue. They kind of can't get a clear path. But kidding aside, what about emergency stuff? What about that? I mean, normally you would think that something like material alterations isn't going to be an emergency thing that somebody could wait. But
again, I don't think that would typically be an emergency. Now, if you have an emergency where you have to do something to your property to protect it, okay, and create an alteration to protect it, I guess, like going back to like the erosion situation or something like that, or it's hard to imagine an emergency that would generate a reason to do an alteration other than something where you're having an issue and you have to do an alteration again to protect the property.
Well, and I would agree normally, but the thing I guess I'm getting at is this emergency is dragging out forever. I mean, we've never had a situation where attorneys felt associations were under emergency powers for this long, right? I mean,
no.
This is
so okay, I see what you mean. So potentially, and we've been talking about this among some of the attorneys, and there is some movement to actually amend the emergency power sections of chapters 718, 719, and 720. But one thing I could see, like for example, again, this is a minor example, like you're putting in these plexiglass partitions, right, in different areas,
right,
to protect people or to separate people from each other. Will we see that like in management offices and things like that, or I don't know, fitness center areas of associations, or where they're doing things like that, making alterations that are pandemic related? So I could see that definitely being done again for the protection. I think that would probably be something that would fall under the maintenance, repair, protection of the residents or the property, or in this case the residents. I don't know, I haven't thought this through completely from every angle, but again, if you're doing the alteration and the purpose of it is again related to health, safety, welfare, protection from damage, whether injury, those things would fit within the exception to having to get a vote, because it would be an alteration related again to maintenance, repair, protection.
Yeah, and I could see that that's not a big leap. That would be understandable. But I guess what I'm getting at is, when you, like as an accountant, for example, we deal with costs, variable costs and fixed costs, and a fixed cost, for example, would be something that you would look at and say, it can't be changed. Typically things like the building you're in, and the depreciation on your building or something like that is considered to be a fixed cost because it's kind of permanent. But what we learn as accountants and economists is that over an extended period of time, any fixed cost is a variable cost, right? Because you could rebuild your building, you can do whatever. I guess what I'm getting at is that with this scenario, at some point in time, as this thing drags out, you may have a normal repair. It may be time you may have been in the process of repainting your building, or of more likely, some rebar change work, and some, balcony work and all that. So now you decide, we're going to do this balcony. We want to change the color of the building because we're going to repaint at the same time, and we want to do this together. So if we're still under emergency powers and we can't have a meeting because it's not safe, is it okay to vote? I mean, why not?
No, I'm not going to go that far. I don't think you're going to look. There are still ways to get the vote, whether you're doing it by a limited proxy type system, or electronic voting. Well, you have to go out and do that properly as far as adopting the electronic voting. But I don't think you can use the pandemic situation, the emergency power situation, then to justify changing the color of the building, because we theoretically can't have a meeting of the owners. I think there are still ways to do the meeting, to get the vote. I would not hang my hat on, because of, the inability to, or it's not safe to, gather together in the clubhouse for a meeting, we can just skip owner votes. I'm not willing to go that far. Again, I still think there are ways to get the whatever owner approval you may need, even under these conditions.
There was I guess what I'm getting at is it seems like we've got, some groups of attorneys that are getting pretty aggressive with allowing, certain things under these emergency powers. I saw one of the, a lot of times there's a question in the paper, condo question for the attorney to answer, and the question one of the issues was, which I found, I guess, kind of crazy. I wonder where it's all going to stop. Is an association has decided that you can't, as a resident, you can't have any guests stay with you for the season coming up. You're not allowed to have any guests. This one was, a resident was complaining that, they come down here to Florida and their friends come down to visit them, play golf. That's why they bought the unit. That's what they do, and now the association saying, well, you can't have anybody stay with you. And then, and that's just a small thing. You could take it to the extremes. There are communities that are designed specifically around the amenities and tourism. To say, well, you're not going to have any guests, or, you can't lease your apartment out, or whatever the deal is. So I don't know. The attorney in this particular situation felt like the board had the ability to do that under the Emergency Powers Act, that was still valid.
I think there's certain things you can do under the emergency powers. I think there's things that are related, to the pandemic, and, many associations, and still, I guess they're still doing it too, limiting guests, limiting visitors, restricting, things like that to, restrict the amount of people coming into the building. Again, I don't think that's the same thing as painting the building pink. Those completely different. These things are related to, this is a pandemic. It is spread by, contact, and they're trying to be cautious as far as, allowing people into the building. So I think many associations adopted pretty stringent restrictions on that, as far as the leasing. Yeah, some were, trying to stop the leasing and stop people from coming in and out of the building as well. I'm not sure there's as much justification for that as there is for participation. But, again, we're all in these uncharted waters dealing with this pandemic. You're right. It's still ongoing, and it doesn't seem to be stopping anytime soon.
Yeah, although I guess we're in phase 3 here in Florida now, so we're in a little better situation. But I just,
according to the governor, but I'm not sure. Anyway, we're not going to go into that because
Yeah, it'd be interesting because I think that probably some of this stuff is going to get. Um, I suspect that at some point the emergency powers have to go away because
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't suspect. Good point. I mean, the emergency powers were extended, and I believe they're going to be ending November. I think it's like 7th or something, if I recall correctly. Uh, I was surprised it was because of our political situation. I was a little surprised it was extended. I'm going to be very surprised if it's extended. In now again, if numbers spike in during the next 4 weeks or so, and things start getting bad again, or don't get much better, it may be extended again. I don't know whether Governor DeSantis will extend because they've been extended for 60-day increments. So again, we're coming up in the beginning of November with the next decision to whether extended or not. If it's not extended, then that will, unless so there's some emergency legislation that changes things that will end associations' ability to impose these emergency restrictions.
right. Yeah, and I think that with and it's going to get a lot more contentious coming up because we're coming into season. I mean, you're talking now. Uh, we're already faced with October, which is kind of the shoulder season. But if this thing spills over into January, um, for example, that situation I was talking about with that association. I mean, if an association put those kind of restrictions and we're in January, there's going to be some, that's going to cause some issues because it's going to cause some financial harm to the owner of the property potentially. If they're dependent upon rentals, for example, in season to be able to cover their mortgage, um, that's going to be a problem if associations all of a sudden arbitrarily decide uh, to eliminate rentals, which I would assume right now they would have the power to do. Uh,
Well,
I
I don't
mean,
know. I mean, the rental one, I've been hesitant to tell my clients that they can stop the rentals.
I wouldn't.
Uh,
I wouldn't see why not. I mean, you're trying to reduce access to the building. I would see no reason why, under the emergency powers, that a board couldn't
they
temporarily
could,
say
they
you can't
could,
lease. Your lease is invalid.
they could possibly do it. They could possibly, but it's not the same thing as the guests with the visitation. Okay. It's not the same numbers. It's not the same right. It's not the same vested right. Um, so it's not quite the same analysis with eliminating the rentals. Short-term rentals, yes, okay, because even the state eliminated short-term rentals to the extent there's people coming in and out a lot. The longer-term rentals, the year rentals. I don't know.
I
Uh,
think they'd have a hard time with the year rentals,
the
uh,
short-term rentals,
but 3 months.
you have a pretty good argument to stop those. Okay, long terms, uh, that's a stretch.
Yeah, but like I said, I could see that, and that's going to be an issue if that's coming up into January, because let's face it, there are restrictions. I mean, if you think about it, where are the people coming from? Most of these
No, we
people.
had this before. I mean,
Yeah,
you have people coming down from back when New York was the hot spot, right? And they were on the quarantine. I had buildings, anyone coming in from, the tri-state area, the New York area, they had to be quarantined for 14 days. Even owners coming back, right, to their units, and or tenants. It was a problem. So yeah, I'm not saying these are easy. These are all very difficult issues, especially for buildings with older people who are vulnerable to the virus, more vulnerable. So I've erred on the side almost all through this thing of upholding the association's ability to impose the restrictions on the basis of trying to protect the health and safety of the residents. And taking my chances with someone challenging them. I'd rather have someone challenge the restriction than someone get sick and die. So that was my thought pattern, that the emergency powers was enough. Again, when you have long-term rentals and things like that, the analysis becomes a little more difficult, though. The short-term ones and the visitation, easy, to justify.
Yeah, and particularly if you've got an association that has lease rights, and normally has lease rights, and then you're looking at taking them away for some period of time. It's kind of tough because, like I say, economically, people are counting on that money to cover, some portion of their costs. And if they don't get it, they're going to not be able to make their assessment payments. They're not going to be able to afford a lot of things. We saw some of that we basically saw some of that at the tail end of this last season. A lot of times there was a lot of problems there because people were they were counting on that last month's worth of rent, and people canceled or whatever, and they shut them down. So I know it's going to be, if this thing is not kind of wrapped up by the start of season, I think Florida's going to have some contentious issues at that point. I think there will be challenges to all of this stuff at that point.
Well, we're going to have issues right now. I mean, even issues with this latest order, from the governor, basically opening up all the businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even saying that restaurants need to be 100% and have to justify to be 50%. They can't go below 50%, but they have to justify the 50% on the economic impact and the health reasons why they're going to go below 100%. Yet at the same time, we're still under a state of emergency. So can associations continue to keep their clubhouses closed and their pools closed? I mean, I think so, but now I know I'm going to get pushback, or I'm going to get questions. I haven't even thought all through yet. If all the businesses are now open, how can they keep the clubhouse closed? Now, a clubhouse is not a business. I understand that it's a private amenity, but I think we're going to see a lot of, like I said, pushback, threats, because I'm not sure whether it's as much in Martin, St. Lucie, but Palm Beach, Broward, Dade, a lot of stuff. A lot of these fitness centers, clubhouses, things like that are still closed. Do they have to open now? Now that everything else is opening? It's an interesting question.
Yeah. We've been pretty. I mean, our situation up here is quite a bit different, I guess. But our restaurants, even at they've been at 50% capacity, and now we're.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, Martin. It was basically 57 out of the 60 counties were open, and the 3 counties weren't.
Yeah.
Okay. And now the 3 are opening. And again, I don't want to get into whole right versus wrong and all that kind of stuff. Didn't raise it for that reason. It's raising interesting questions, in terms of, how our association is going to react. I mean, just the questions you were asking, if all the businesses are open, we can't rent our unit. So it's just, we'll see. I mean, again, all these things are being flushed through for literally the first time ever. So
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see coming up here in the near future. I would say within the next month or 2, maybe 3, because of the restriction on evictions, we're going to have issues in associations with owners that can't pay because their investment property, they bought them to lease them out, and the tenants aren't paying any rent, and they can't evict them. So now that's where I could see a smart association working with the owner and saying on a temporary basis, we're eliminating all leases because we're concerned with the coronavirus, and lo and behold, you evict a bunch of people. But it'll be interesting to see how that would play out because there are protections on the rental side. So it'd be interesting to see what would happen in that situation, which powers would carry the most weight. But anyway, it is going to be, so I'm looking at, and the reason I got to thinking about it is that in some of the groups I'm in, for example, the city's already canceling or I think they've officially canceled the Christmas parade, which has gone for some, 45 years or something. And, they're getting rid of a lot of that. They're getting rid of a lot of the Halloween stuff and, all of these kind of things. And so we're starting to come on. It's kind of funny because the summer's kind of slow in Florida, and, even activities, vacations and things, they're more scheduled, where you can move them around a little bit if you need to, or change what you were going to do. But as we get closer to the holidays, end of the season, some of these things become more, you either got to do it the way it's always been done, or you lose it. There's not a choice of let's modifying it a little. It's either we do it or we don't do it. It's kind of hard to socially distance a Christmas parade outside and restrict it, be able to police it, so to speak. But anyway, although you would think if you're outside, it would make sense. You could be 6 feet apart. But anyway, it's going to be, I think some things are going to have to end. I'll be interested to see if the governor waits until the 7th of November. I guess he could, because, the season doesn't really start until, right around Veterans Day, but, which is a few days later than that. So, and it'll be after the election. So maybe, but see, that's the other thing, we got a big election and a lot of people are Florida residents. So they either are going to come down here to vote or they're going to do absentee. But I think there'll be some issues there too. People want to come down, open it up their unit, vote, and then head back up. But anyway, we'll see. It's good, but we'll keep on top of it. And we appreciate everybody joining us and listening in. We hope that you'll continue to listen. And if you've got questions or comments, please write the number down, 220-9788, 220-WSTU. Keep it for this show or other shows and give us a call and, ask us your question, and we'll be here for you. I'm Mark Breckbill, CPA, along with Peter Mullengarden, our attorney, and we're here every Monday morning from 9 to 10 o'clock right here on WSTU Digital 1450. We're Martin County's Heritage Station.